Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Victorious Ones podcast, a place where gaming meets comics, meets movies, as gaming meets comics, meets music, as well as movies, as well as gaming, along with inspiration. Of course, I'm your host, King Von Jr. You can follow me on social media on Twitter/X, which is now X, at 301 King Von Jr. You can follow the show's the podcast X page at Victory Pod One. I'm also on Instagram at Mr. King Von Jr. You can follow the show's Instagram page at Victorious Ones Podcast. I'm also the social media producer for Perfect Plex Talk Radio, hosted by friend of the program Mike Knox on Mondays at 6 p.m. And so, as I just said, one of the things that we cover that this podcast covers is movies. And so, of course, big highlight for me this past weekend. Let me get, before I get into everything else, I'll talk about, what's going to talk about the NBA's 100 lists and, especially the most glaring omission, if you will, in the top 10. More on that later, as well as my review of Saturday night's main event, along with WWE Evolution II. And so those are the main topics I'm going to be covering. But like I said, I got a chance to see Superman this past weekend, opening weekend, by the way. For those can't really see, I'm wearing the Superman shirt. It's a really cool shirt that I got from Old Navy. Salute to them right before I went to go see the movie. Perfect timing. And so I will say that obviously this Superman movie is now directed by James Gunn. A lot of the DC universe that we're about to see moving forward is going to be spearheaded by James Gunn. Of course, he had the former director over Marvel Studios. As we all know that he was the director of Guardians of the Galaxy, and so James has a track record of taking C or D level characters and turning them into household names. I mean, look at his track record, like I said, with Guardians, and how he just took that to a whole nother level and made them household names like they never have been before. And not only that, but also what he did with Suicide Squad, the success of Suicide Squad 2. With the introduction of Peacemaker, played by John Cena, along with other characters, as far as like King Shark and so many others, and you could definitely tell that it's got a James Gunn feel, because there's a certain comedy element along with the brightness of the poster, the presentation, if you will. They're definitely brighter movies, a little bit more humor in them. And so, and really this one was no different. So instead of taking, C or D level, B-list, talent, which are characters, which is also what he did in this movie, with three pretty obscure characters, but also what he has done with an A-level character, A-list character like Superman, the ultimate A-list superhero, and just character in general. And for him to breathe new life into Superman, and to get this Superman feels so much like a throwback. To like some Christopher Reeve, rest in peace, of course. And so with this one, it's definitely opposites between this one and the Henry Cavill Superman. As great as Henry was, and of course, his most defining role, of course, was in Man of Steel. That's where initially gained his notoriety before going into like Batman vs Superman and Justice League, and so on. But the thing is, that one had more of an edge to him, more of a darker side to him, even with even with the color of the suit, even the blue itself, was initially darker, under with Cavill. And the thing about it was that they made the Henry Cavill Superman, you know, more unrelatable, you know, like not quite as approachable, if you will. You know, at the same time, you know, that Superman was definitely, you know, like more, say, a little more. They definitely had more of an edge, you know, to the point where they had him kill Zod, you know, man, and so on. It was just, like I said, it was just, just more of an edge. And so, if they wanted to, Cavill could have even played the Injustice version of Superman. You know what I mean? Like like he's that convincing. So with this Superman, like I said, it's a different tone. Somebody said that there was somebody online who said it best. Um, the Cavill Superman was made to look like a god. You know, made like he's where he's indestructible, immune to pain and everything like that. Case in point, look how he was in Justice League. Whereas this Superman, they've made him more human. They have, like I said, they've humanized the Superman, and it just made him more relatable. They just said in the movie, he's just as much of a human as Lex or anyone else. And so this Superman, they made him more relatable. You know what I mean? Like made him more approachable, made him more um, personable. You know what I mean? And so you know what I mean? Like, and the thing is, even with the comedy, it was very well, like I said, very well balanced, very well, like placed very well. Um, you know what I mean? Like I said, it had its time, like I said, this movie, had its times to pull the trigger when the time was right, and they absolutely did that, right? And so, you know what I mean? Like I said, just when it comes to, like I said, just when it comes to this being a more wholesome Superman, you know what I mean? Like just a more um, relatable Superman, right? And so in a big uh, narrative about this movie, it very much mirrors the current climate that we're in, right? And so, um, what I mean by that is, one of the really hot button topics, one of the biggest talking points has to deal with immigration, and so this movie leans very heavily into that. And so, even though it's received great reviews by, by Rotten Tomatoes and like, and like, what was it, audience score or something like that, I see that it definitely had great reviews, rave reviews. But there was a certain demographic um, that was not feeling it. They were not, like I said, they really triggered them. It really, or rather, it just really just struck a chord with them, really touched a nerve, if you will, and certainly rubbed them the wrong way. And when I say a certain fan base, I'm talking about ones who like to wear red hats, who are. But let's just call it what it is. This Superman movie, it really, let's just say, call it what it is. It pissed off a lot of MAGA people, and so if anything, those were the biggest critics of that movie, where the MAGA audience, because in their eyes they felt Superman became too woke. They felt that this movie was talking too much about politics, and I'm not the one to, like I said, I mean, I know how to, to talk about it, and I know when to kind of draw the line. But let's just call it what it is, because it's the giant pink elephant in the room. Um, and so, and by the way, shout out to those that are watching by way of X, and those even those who want to watch by way of youtube.com/. Von Resper Jr. And so, like seeing back to that. Like I said, what I'm saying is that, like I say, that particular subject matter, it just really rubbed them the wrong way, because if anything, this movie was more of a mirror to them, more of a reflection to them, to tell them about themselves. And and like I say, like when I look at when I look at the comments or reviews and say it's too progressive and too woke and all this other type of stuff, it's not about it being too woke. It's just that There are a lot of people who thought Superman was really for them, and when he wasn't. You know, and the thing is, comics. I mean, politics, and social issues have always been a comic since the beginning of time, right? And so, like whether it was whether it was Superman's early years, of course, being very much like I said, anti-fascism and all these other different type of things. Superman's always been a man about the people. He's never been a symbol, a corporate symbol. And if anything, he's the original voice for the voiceless. Shout out to CM Punk. But but if anything, this movie was really really telling MAGA about themselves, and they were not satisfied about it. So the biggest critics, the main skeptics, were like I say, like I say, are definitely Team MAGA. Like with the red hats with 47 on them, and 45 and 47. So yeah, like and like I said, because of the fact that that they thought that since Superman is supposed to be a symbol of hope, like with the colors that he wears, that that he'll be all for them and everything like that. Absolutely not, you know. And so and like I said before, um, politics and social issues have always been in comics, even dating back to Captain America's very first issue, the first cover has him knocking out Hitler. There you go. Um, need I say more? The X-Men were literally inspired by the civil rights movement, you know, and there have been plenty of X-Men issues, with the tackle issues, that, social issues such as race, politics and whatnot, right? And so if anything, mutants, if anything, were analogy, a metaphor, for African Americans, for Black people, in terms of having their, in terms of fighting for equal rights and civilian rights and everything like that. That's what X-Men, what X-Men represents. And so back to this, like I said, and like I said, if anything that talks about it, I see Captain America is definitely anti-fascism, anti-racism, anti-Nazi, and all the everything like that. So if anything, Steve Rogers, Sam Wilson, anybody who's Captain America would disapprove of of the MAGA narrative and what they stand for and everything like that. And so fast forward to what we see now with Superman. Like I said, um, you know, like I said, the Red Hat crew, was very surprised and taken off guard by like I said, by how much this movie talked about, like I said, talked about immigration, and talking about borders and everything like that. And so this movie, definitely heavily leans into that, and more, like I say, more so just shed light on on how how just how just evil this world is when it comes to immigrants. And and if anything, Superman shows that he's for the immigrants. If anything, Superman himself essentially is really an immigrant himself. Like when I say that, it's because because of the fact that he comes from another planet. He's from a different race. You know what I mean? So if anything, in terms of Superman and immigrants, all that stuff goes hand in hand. Um, and so like I say, this movie definitely tackled that head on. Not only did it tackle it, it completely sacked it, like completely sacked that topic. Like it was a defensive lineman. And so yeah, what I mean. Like I said, it was, if anything, this movie, definitely raised a mirror to those who were pro deportation and building walls and all this other type of stuff. I was like, as soon as I saw something in the movie on the news about about borders, I was like, I know this. I see where they're going with this, and they were not afraid to go there with that, right? What I mean? And so it was definitely great to see that. And and the thing about it is that like I said, and the thing about it is a lot of the skeptics and critics, thought that Superman was being too woke. It's not about, like I said, it's not about being, as I meant to say before, it's not so much about him being woke. It's about, when it comes to these critics, it's not about Superman being woke. It's more so that you grew up to be the villain. It's more so that you grew up to, like I say, it's like I said, it's not so much, like I said, not so much about the character being woke. It's just that the audience is that many of the audience have grown up to be more like Lex Luthor than Clark Kent. You know what I mean? And when I say that, you just look at the ideals that people uphold, things that people vote for. You know what I mean? Like like say the different principles that that people have or lack thereof. All those things, all those patterns of behavior lets me know, that if you were in that in that universe, you would be on the wrong side of history, more so Team Lex than Team Superman. And so so clearly, a hit dog will holler. A lot of dogs that were hollering and screaming when they saw that movie and saw the subject matter, right? And so I will say also that I enjoyed the chemistry between Clark Kent and Lois Lane. You know what I mean? Like, they're definitely very compatible for one another. Like, better. I think it's probably some of the best, if not the best, Lois and Clark chemistry that I've ever seen out of any Superman movie or whatever. You know what I mean? So of course, like I said, that's one of the things that they definitely heavily lean into. And when it comes to the way that James Gunn elevates lesser names, or like names that aren't very familiar, he does that once again, because the breakout star of this movie was Mr. Terrific, and the guy that played him was in that the X-Men Origins Wolverine, where his power was that he was not supposed to die. He ends up dying anyway. Well, thankfully, they gave him another chance with the Superman movie, and he completely hit a home run. You know what I mean? And so, if anything, he was definitely a scene stealer. So that's a testament to what James Gunn can do, as well as they included Hawkgirl and Guy Gardner as the Green Lantern representative on Earth, and they call themselves the Justice Gang instead of the Justice League, Justice Gang, because it was a Superman and and three D-listers, if you will, But they did have the Hall of Justice, so that lets me know that that James Gunn has long-term plans for for even better Justice League, where they could use that building. So it's great to see the Hall of Justice in there. For those that are familiar with Super Friends, that's where they used to meet. So as far as that, and also one of the heaviest talking points, not only about immigration, but also about, I'll just go ahead and say it, Lex Luthor is a Hall of Fame level hater. This dude is a generational hater. If there was anybody who should win player hater of the year for 2025, is Lex Luthor. You know what I mean? He keeps the same energy that Kendrick had on Euphoria, when he said, "I hate the way that you walk, the way that you talk, I hate the way that you dress." You know what I mean? And so I was like, yeah, that's how Lex feels about Superman. You know what I mean? He's like I said, Lex is that petty, that obsessed. You know what I mean? Like he'll do everything that he can to to destroy the Man of Steel, and it was no, like I say, couldn't find any better evidence than in the movie itself, because Lex is a reflection or mirror image of Trump. Only difference is that Lex is bald Trump is not. You know what I mean? Lex doesn't have an ugly orange tan. He's in better shape too. You know, uh, but also at the same time, the biggest thing they have in common, so other than being villains, is that um, they both thrive off of creating smear campaigns and narratives that favor them. You know what I mean? So they rather be an echo chamber than to square off with someone who opposes them. And so what Lex did in this movie, he created a smear campaign uh, after obtaining, of course, after obtaining footage of Superman's parents, and it's, of course, telling Superman to, to pretty much destroy Earth and and a human, and if find someone that you could, pretty much create a whole new generation with all of that other type of stuff, being appropriate, is what it was, and so. Like I'm saying, is just the way that the video was put together. It really turned Superman into public enemy #1. You know what I mean? And so I mean, it was him against the world. There was a point where where everybody was looking at Superman sideways, giving him the dirtiest, ugliest looks known to man. Right. But in the end, Superman was able to able to fight Falcon, those narratives. You know what I mean? So that was seeing this movie, shot. I guess I should give the notes and spoiler alert. You know what I mean? So like, maybe I should have said it. Should have said it right before I even got into this topic. You know what I mean? And so, but yeah, like I said, as far as that, we also saw an Ultraman reference, and so when I saw that, I was thinking, so I guess we're going to be getting the Crime Syndicate, because Ultraman is Superman from another Earth, another universe, or whatever. And so, and just to see how obsessed Lex was with Superman, it got to a point where Superman was even trapped in like some side inside like a pocket dimension or whatever, and of course, eventually he was able to find a way for find a way to get to some type of sunlight, because Superman, as well known, Superman draws his strength from the sun, and this movie leaned heavily into that. You know what I mean? In terms of Superman, like seeing constantly getting, of course, getting exposure from the sun, which is where he gets his strength from. And so, um, for him to, in the end, ultimately put Lex in his place. And I must say this though, Crypto. I mean, yeah, like I said, Crypto was Superman's dog. Was another scene stealer. If anything, that's probably the biggest scene stealer of all. And and like I said, just for the comic relief, that was just straight up hilarious. You know what I mean? And so yeah, and also not like I said, as far as that, and to see sort of like the duality between Clark Kent and Superman, and just in terms, like I said, if anything, just in terms of that, in terms of Superman just maintaining a very healthy balance. You know what I mean? So, but like I said, between himself and Clark Kent. And I mean, like I said, there's just something, like I said, just something just special, just something different about this Superman that I hadn't seen in a long, long time. And it was very exciting. This movie was, I said, if anything, this movie was very, very exciting. something, that was definitely proud to see. And so, if anything, I would give this movie an 8.5 out of 10. If I were to give it a review, I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10. And I'm already looking forward to what they're going to do with the rest of the DCU. And so, yeah, if anything, it's going to be great to see them on the map, if not back on the map or whatever. But also, one thing is, before I go any further, I certainly want to talk about, Bleacher Report's top 100 list. And the main topic of discussion that nobody can escape, that's the biggest talking point of this list, is when you look at the top 10, the biggest name that's missing on the list is the late, great Kobe Bryant. Instead, Bleacher Report has him at number 11. Now, I get that Kobe, when he was alive, was, shall we say, polarizing? Sure. But that is not enough to negate his accomplishments, his numbers, his game, his impact, and just overall stamp on the game. And for him to be the second greatest shooting guard of all time, but you can't even crack the top 10 is laughable. It's insulting. So if Kobe is not your top 10 at the very bare minimum, then throw the whole list away. Personally, I have him in the top 5, between top three or top 5. And so, but like I said, for Kobe to be out of that pantheon altogether, it's just alarming and it's disturbing, and it further feeds, the smear campaigns and narratives that certain former players have been echoing. And it gives further weight to, unnecessary weight to his skeptics, like Tracy McGrady or Gilbert Arenas, who would do anything to trade places with Kobe's career, if not, not just the life they lived overall. And let me just say it like this: I, along with a lot of other fans, felt like Bleacher Report was playing in our face. And Bleacher Report has a habit of playing in people's faces. They have a habit of playing in everybody's face. But this right here is really where I had to draw the line. Because if not only 5 championships, 2 finals MVPs, 2-time scoring champion, franchise all-time leader in points, 33,643 for the Lakers, 18 All-Star selections, 4 All-Star MVPs, multiple All-NBA first-team selections, multiple All-NBA, like I said, all defensive team selections, and most of them being on the defensive first team, by the way. This is someone who has proven his mettle both on offensive and defensive ends. And so, like I say, 5-time champion, 2-time Finals MVP, 1-time league MVP in 2008, which we really should have had more. But we know that that the NBA was doing damage control, and of course they used Steve Nash as a sacrificial lamb, if you will, to give the proverbial middle finger to Kobe. try to rewrite history and act like this dude wasn't somehow the face of the league, the face of his generation. Like I said, 18-time All-Star, 4 All-NBA, it's not All-NBA, excuse me, 4 All-Star MVP awards, 11-time All-NBA first team, more than Jordan, by the way. Like I said, here's accolades. 5-time NBA champion, 2-time Finals MVP, like I said, of course, 2008 league MVP, 18-time All-Star, 4-time All-Star Game MVP, 11-time All-NBA first team, 2-time All-NBA second team, and 2-time All-NBA third team, 9-time All-Defensive first team, 3-time All-Defensive second team, so that's a total of 12 All-Defensive team selections to go with 15 All-NBA selections collectively. 2-time scoring champion. Of course, dunk contest, and whatever. Of course, he's also made the 75th anniversary team. He's had both 8 and 24 retired, and if anything, if anything that for Kobe to be compared to other than Jordan would be, what number was he better with, 8 or 24? So to have both those numbers retired speaks volumes of his greatness. And so obviously first ballot Hall of Famer, the headliner for the class of 2020. And so I say all that, and also he's also been of course multi-time Olympic gold medal winner. So as far as that, if anything, he's a 2-time Olympic gold medal winner. He's also won the FIBA American Championship in Las Vegas, and so on. Like I said, with a resume like his, if that is not good enough for the top 10, I don't know what else is. With everything that I just ran off, everything that I just mentioned, all the statistics that just ran off about this dude's career. If he is not top 10, I don't know who else would be. Because he has a resume that far outshines, a lot of people that are already in the top 10. And for a guy like that to have, there was even a point where we had beat more 50-win teams than Magic and Kareem. And for him to, become the alpha of that team and be that guy for 12 years, to be the main option. But he's been the main option for the Lakers longer than he was a sidekick. And even as a quote unquote sidekick, he played more like a 1B. And so for him to have those 2 career arcs and to excel in both of those speaks volumes. And so and the thing is, you have former players who don't have an agenda, who can speak with honesty and testify about Kobe's greatness, about how he was the toughest assignment to guard, and guys that have gone to war with him, gone in the trenches with him, and respect him as a fellow warrior in battle, and just to just to have enough humility to admit and realize, he was that dude. If anything, he was the very son that the rest of the league revolved around. It's just like I see his resume speaks for itself, and when it comes to his impact, when it comes to Mamba mentality, which is really just motivation to be the best version of yourself, each and every day. in any and every in anything that you do, everything that you put your hand to, um, is for you to, like I said, for you to have that mama mentality to be to constantly improve and be a better version of yourself. You can apply that not only when it comes to basketball, you can apply that just any other sport. Also when it comes to business, music, gaming, in my case, art. You know what I mean? So I even apply that when it comes to stuff that I draw. You know what I mean? I look to become even better than I was yesterday. I say I put enough time and put enough discipline to to go above my last project. And so all that to say that that's what Kobe Mamba mentality represented. So if anything, if anything, like say, Kobe's stamp on the game is too large to ignore and to overlook, and it's too large to be compressed to a level below the top 10. That's insulting. And the thing is, we live in a world where people don't really care about honesty when it comes to their evaluations. You have publications and influencers and people and stuff like that who will come up with lists like this for the sake, not for the sake of presenting truth and just for the sake of presenting truth and honesty, but more so for the sake of clickbait, for the sake of conversation, for the sake of engagement farming. I look at this as a method of engagement farming. That's really what it is. To all for the sake of creating conversation, all for the sake of creating controversy. Certain things you don't need to do for the sake of creating conversation. You know what I mean? Like to do something. You don't always have to do something controversial. You don't always have to give some type of hot take or just give some silly opinion for the sake of creating some type of conversation, all to gaslight people and to get them triggered. And that's really what this was. When Kobe universally, I would say at minimum is top 10 universally from an objective point of view all across the board. And I am coming towards the finish line of an article that I've been working on about Kobe. So make sure to stay tuned about that. Stay tuned for that. So, now it's time to move on to wrestling as a palate cleanser, with the rest of the time that we have for this. So, it's time to get into the week in wrestling. Just to go into a recap of SmackDown. Quick recap. WWE Tag Team Championship match, the YS6 versus Street Profits. We saw that LA Knight kicked off the show. Just 24 hours from his biggest match in over a year against Seth Rollins on Saturday night's main event. LA Knight hit the ring to address. Of course, Seth Rollins only interrupted by Paul Heyman, who called himself the Oracle. I'm not calling that Oracle. That just means clearly Heyman has lost his aura since since going to separate ways from Roman Reigns. Let's just call it what it is. Like, this group ain't hit. Of course, Heyman, warned that the LA Knight had no future before it was Solo Sikoa and MFT's Tall Tonga Long and JC Taylor made their way to the ring, threatening to make history repeat itself. By putting Heyman through the table. And it's just all right. But the thing is, it just feels like this whole thing was just feeling forced. just like not much to say, not much to write home about, yada yada yada, whatever. We saw LA Knight making fun of Braun Breaker, whatever. Um, it just whatever. There's nothing else to really say about this. It's just like, all right, move on. Next up, we have a fatal four-way between Soruka, Alexa Bliss, Kairi Sane, and Roxanne Perez. And the winner of this match is none other than Alexa Bliss. And of course, she has the odd couple tag team with Charlotte now. And of course, we have the WWE Tag Team Championship match, the Wyatt Six versus the Street Profits. And the winners and new tag team champions, the Wyatt Six. So Dexter Lumis now has a championship. Can you believe that? Him and Joe Gacy. So next up we have Logan Paul getting interrupted by Jelly Roll. So of course we have a celebrity, match at SummerSlam, and we have, if anything, of course, if anything, Jelly Roll is not going to be by himself because he has the Viper Randy Orton. It's his tag team partner. Orton loves Jelly Roll, so we're going to have Randy Orton and Jelly Roll going up against Drew McIntyre and Logan Paul for SummerSlam. Or of course, whatever. But it was also confirmed that Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton were going to have a match Saturday night's main event. So whatever. Anyway, I digress. Next up, we also had Ron Killings versus Aleister Black, and the winner of this match, Ron Killings. Crash Out Killings. Hey, I'm all for it. We have Tiffany Stratton, and Trish Stratus going face to face. And then, of course, Trish and Tiffany, like I say, came face to face. And so, of course, Trish looked great in that all white. And she was right when she said, she's, she was every fan's first crush. Zero lies detected. And so, obviously, we saw them take shots at each other before Naomi made her appearance, with the Money in the Bank briefcase. Mind both of them is not out of the realm of possibility that you cash in and leave Atlanta, with the championship. Of course, we'll find out later, what belts you capture. Then we also saw that Jay Cargill attacked Naomi, and this would turn into a huge brawl. You know what I mean? And so it got to the point it was just uncontrollable. And so, so that's when Adam Pearce, Nick Aldis, Nick Aldis made it official. That was going to be a Jay versus Naomi at Evolution, and of course, that's when not only the match will be official, but also with a special guest referee, and that's when Bianca Belair showed up, and she had a huge ovation, huge crowd reaction, and it was solidified that she become the special guest referee for that match. More on that later. Then we have LA Knight and Jimmy Uso versus Solo Sikoa and Jason Mateo, and of course LA Knight and Jimmy Uso won. That was short-lived. This Bronson Reed, ended up in a massive tsunami on LA Knight. So it's just like whatever. Brings LA mid at this point, and so now it is time to go into Saturday night's main event. Let me go and pull up that card. So for Saturday nights, let me take that back. I've got it mixed up. So as far as like the Jay and Naomi battle, that was actually in the Saturday's main event, and that's when Nick Aldis called the decision right there for Bianca to be the guest referee. But yeah, as far as the Saturday's main event, the Viper Randy Orton defeated Drew McIntyre, and of course Naomi attacked Jay Cargill in the crowd, and that's when the brawl took place. And so as a result, SmackDown General Manager Nick Aldis named Bianca the special guest referee for the No Holds Barred match at Evolution, the following night, that Sunday. And then we also saw United States Champion Solo Sikoa defeat Jimmy Uso. LA Knight were going to defeat Seth Rollins, even though the original plan was for Seth Rollins to win. And this is where the plans for SummerSlam and Survivor Series are about to take a very sharp turn, because during this match, Seth Rollins sustained a very critical injury. Not critical, but a very severe injury, as he was doing some type of like moonsault or flip off the top rope, and landed the wrong way on his knee, and it was the same knee that he had problems with before. When he had his first major injury back in 2015, when he was still the WWE champion, and that injury is what sidelined him from WrestleMania 32, when first time in Dallas. That was back when the whole roster was plagued by injuries, and his was one of the most significant injuries for that. And so it looks like it's that same knee, and it's been revealed, it's been confirmed that he's going to be out. He's really going to be. His whole way is going to be out for the rest of the year. And so they say between 4 to 6 months, and what that means is that at best expect to see Rollins back by the Royal Rumble, by the start of the next WrestleMania season, and that's a critical blow. And because of that, that's what changed the tide for the match. And so, so of course, that's when LA Knight, hit Rollins with his finisher, the BFT, just to put a close to the match, and that's rough. And the thing is also, of course, really also Seth is still the Money in the Bank winner, and so I guess they got to keep the briefcase warm until it's time for him to come back. So for him to be sidelined is very unfortunate. So obviously it's already been confirmed by Seth himself, and so everybody who's hopping on the Dave Meltzer conspiracy theory bandwagon, thinking that it's work. Guess what's confirmed is not a work. Everything doesn't have to be a work. But yeah, so as far as that, let's go back to. So not only that, but last but not least, this cluster, the World Heavyweight Championship match, Gunther versus Bill Goldfraud. Gunther dragged this match on longer than it needed to, all for the sake of making Goldberg look better and feel better. Because the same Goldberg that is politics or strong arm his way to having to having a big retirement match and send off and all this stupid stuff, right? It's just like, for what? Like, what have you done to warrant a hero's farewell? For one, clearly you're not a student of history, because if you look at WWE's track record when it comes to WCW guys coming over, it ain't that great. Not many of them, are granted that hero's welcome and send off like that. Even Bret Hart himself, a long time WWE guy, couldn't have a farewell tour, all because of you. You know what I mean? So, and also, like, the way that Gunther had carried him in a match that lasted 10 minutes longer than it needed to. If anything, that's a testament to Gunther's greatness. But and even with that, like I said, WWE even let Goldberg give a farewell speech. But with NBC being the network they are, they was like, you know what, we ain't playing it by our time. You know what I mean? So you could go ahead and you keep giving your speech all you want to. We're not going to air the rest of it, because when it comes to time, we don't play that. So because of that, the execs at NBC, cut his speech short on TV, even though it's available elsewhere. I think even on the WWE website. And I think it's funny with the memes, with the Bret Hart memes. Showing him in a production room, in the production room, being in the production room, cut the speech short. You know what I mean? So I would, the funny thing is, I wouldn't put it past Bret to do that. You know what I mean? So as far as that, and the thing is, everything that Goldberg says and does just continues to prove that Bret is right. He's been right this whole entire time. Team Bret all the way, because Goldberg, gold fraud, just his massive entitlement. How dare you? How dare you? Number one, how dare you even strong arm your way into some type of retirement tour, dude? You're not John Cena. You're not The Undertaker. I mean, you're not Shawn Michaels. So WWE doesn't have to do that, But because you pressed them so much, it's like, you know what? Here, shut up. Leave us alone. That's really what this was. And even with that, you still complain. Because online, he complained about his speech being cut short. He laughed off Gunther's chops. So it shows that he's not satisfied, that he's disrespectful as well. He also, and the thing is, he also speared Charles Robinson so hard that he cracked his ribs. Initially he didn't apologize, but I guess behind closed doors he did, whatever. But but still, even in a retirement match, this dude is reckless. And so it's just like, it's not like you had a super long career. It's not like you had a very decorated career, or or that decorated in the ring, or that legendary from a in-ring standpoint, or whatever the case is. I mean, it's just like, he's more of a bald version of the Warrior. You know what I mean? Like, all muscle, very limited move set. A lot of charisma. Certainly knew how to draw. Certainly knew how to draw audience for for a short period of time. But but the thing is, he's someone that that you're not gonna look back and think about classic matches for one. And his whole thing was to make sure that his son got to see him wrestle. I mean, for one, your son already got to see wrestle. As a matter of fact, his son was with him at Summerslam against Bobby Lashley. Like, that wasn't enough. Like, that wasn't enough of a send off. You know what I mean? And I believe they might be like guys that lost to Roman as well. And so I'm like, come on now. Like, what more do you need? It reminds me of when Draymond said to Paul Pierce, you're out here chasing a farewell tour, but you're not Kobe. It's the same thing. Paul Pierce, Paul Pierce was chasing this, this hero's send off and farewell from all across the league, the same way that Kobe got it, and so thankfully Draymond, one of the times I agree with him, thankfully Draymond had to remind him, it's like, look, dude, you're not Kobe. The fans are not going to give that to you. They're not going to give you the red carpet treatment on your way out, because you're not that guy to do that. And the same thing with Goldberg. You're not Undertaker. You're not Cena. You're not HBK. All those guys, They earned that send off. You're certainly not Ric Flair, even with his 1,000 retirements or whatever. But if anything, like I said, Flair, if anything, Flair was an exception. You know what I mean? Because because of the fact that he made his name outside of WWE, his best years outside of WWE, and for them to to roll out the red carpet for him on a send off, and his last opponent in WWE to be Shawn Michaels of all people, perfect opponent, perfect storybook ending. You know what I mean? So that great exclamation point for him. Exclamation point for his career. And so, you know what I mean? Like I said, Ric Flair is the exception. He is certainly not Ric Flair. And so it's funny how Goldberg, I find it hilarious, but not in a good way. It'd be funny if it wasn't so sad about how Goldberg complained, that his speech was cut short, but you cut Bret Hart's career short. And it's the same Goldberg that insulted Vince McMahon. Anything that Triple H, wouldn't have that in the back of his mind. So, if anything, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. So you have gone on different outlets and have run the company down. And then here you are, and here you are. The company gives you, what you've been crying about, complaining about, begging for, campaigning for, and you stink it up in your last match. They give you the very thing that you have cried about for the longest time. They give it to you, and you lay an egg. So Goldberg screwed Goldberg. I have nothing else to say about that. So anyway, moving on. Of course, I'm going to go ahead and, just a palate cleanser. Moving on to Evolution. This was the real highlight of the weekend. This was the best thing that happened this weekend. WWE Evolution Part 2. A women's only pay-per-view. And I must say that it far outshined Saturday night's mid-event. Because that's what Saturday was. It was mid. And if anything, like I said, Evolution 2 was, like I said, it was full of highlights from point A to, from point A to point Z, from point A to point B, A through Z, like I say, no matter what. And of course, there's a lineup for Saturday's main event. Like I see, JC Jane versus Jordan Grace, for the NXT Women's Championship. Jade Cargill versus Naomi. No holds bar match with Bianca as the referee. Battle Royal for the world title shot at Clash in Paris. Raquel and Roxanne versus Charlotte and Alexa Bliss. Sol Ruka and Zarya versus Kabuki Warriors. For the Women's Tag Team Championships. Becky Lynch versus Bayley versus Lyra Triple Threat for the Women's Intercontinental title. Tip versus Trish for the WWE Women's Championship. And of course, Io Sky versus Rhea Ripley, for the Women's World Championship. So, so to kick things off, we open up with the Women's Intercontinental Championship. With Becky Lynch as the champion, taking on fellow horsewoman Bayley and, of course, up-and-comer, future of the women's division, Lyra Valkyrie. And so the winner of this match was the crowd champion. This is awesome. Very well deserved. And it was very entertaining. And the winner of this match is still your Women's Intercontinental Champion, Becky Lynch. And I like how Becky clapped back at people calling her Becky Hogan. She was like, I'm not Becky Hogan, I'm Becky freaking Lynch. I said, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Talk your talk. Talk your talk. You know what I mean? And if anything, that definitely is insulting, because if anything, Hogan himself would feel insulted carrying the Intercontinental title. You know what I mean? And Hogan would definitely stink up the place as the IC champion. You know what I mean? So that's why it was never meant for him to be no IC champion. if anything, Becky's done more when it comes to moving her division forward than Hogan ever did for his. If anything, Becky's done more to elevate her opponents than Hogan ever did when it came to elevating his opponents. So we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna play in Becky's face about that. Even though it looked like Bayley might win before Becky rolled her into a backslide pin to get the win. So I can see of course the winner of this match is still champion. The man herself, Becky Lynch, big time Bex. Whatever. Then we have JC Jane versus Jordan Grace, and the winner of this match, JC Jane, and of course, so first it looked like Blake Monroe was Jordan Grace's ally, the Juggernaut herself, aka China Jr. Well, the reason why China Jr. But like I said, the mini Juggernaut, Jordan. Like I said, of course, the match itself was pretty decent. And the thing is, JC Jane didn't necessarily cheat, but she did use some pretty dirty tactics, tricks to get the upper hand. And so, like I said, it looked as though Blake was going to be Jordan's ally, as she took out Fallon Henley and what's the face, Jasmine Nix, only for her to only to blindside Jordan Grace by hitting her with the belt. And of course that's what gave JC Jane the assist to still retain the championship. So your winner is still your NXT Women's Champion, JC Jane. And then next up we have Raquel and Roxanne in the women's fatal four-way for the tag titles against the Kabuki Warriors, Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss, and Sol Ruka and Zarya. And the winners of this match, of course, Raquel and Roxanne. Raquel Rodriguez and Roxanne Perez. And recently, Kevin Nash, gave his own criticism of Raquel Rodriguez. And she calls herself Big Mom and cool. She doesn't really wrestle, like a bigger style. And so of course, Raquel clearly took that criticism to heart. And if anything, it looks like she's internalizing it and using that to as motivation to make herself to improve herself in the ring. And especially because they call her Big Mommy Cool. She's supposed to be the lady version of Diesel, whatever. But yeah, if anything, I would say that hopefully that's going to be the turning point for Raquel in the ring. But yeah, like I said, other than that, her Roxanne are still the women's tag champions. And then we have Tippy Time versus Trishy Time. This was this is a pretty nice match, and it goes to show that so once again Trish still has it, and for her to Tip at the power size advantage. Trish definitely relied on her experience, more if anything, more than anything else, and so there wasn't a lot of urgency when it came to winning this championship, but it was a very enjoyable showing. In the end, Tippy Time ends up winning with the prettiest moonsault ever. And that was a huge W on her resume to defeat a legend and icon like Trish Stratus. So yeah, and also the Stratus faction from April looked great as well. And this is where the tide really starts to change. Things really start to heat up for the Evolution when we have Jade Cargill versus Naomi in no holds barred match. This is a hardcore match, and they had Bianca as the referee, and she was just checking on both of them throughout the match, to see how they were doing, and unlike any referee ever, and so because it's just like Bianca was torn, just halt between two opinions, if you will. And it was enjoyable. I loved it. You know, and I was like, man, this is intensity. I mean, if and not only that, but of course, Naomi even had the razor blades on the gear, and so I mean, she was taking it to Jade. It almost reminded me of Cactus Jack versus Randy Orton. This is, the kind of vibe that I got from this match. And I'm not, and the thing is, of course, Naomi, so feels more like, like just going to her Cactus Jack, bag. And so, shout out to those wrestling girls, by the way, because I was watching live along with them. Of course, I was in the comments on their Twitch, but yeah, like seeing, see them, give the commentary, while simultaneously, watching Evolution myself. If anything, that made it a more entertaining experience. But yeah, like I said, I mean, like I said, they just brought everything out. This was absolutely bitter rivalry. Like I said, Naomi definitely gives off, Cactus Jack vibes when it comes to the women. Jade's not as polished as Randy in the ring, but at the same time, like she still gives off that vibe, like especially when it comes to the dynamic between her and Bianca. If Bianca's the Cena of the women's division, then I've said it before, from the time that Jade, even, before Jade even got into the company, I kept saying if Bianca's Cena, then Jade's going to have to be her Orton. And sure enough, this match reminded me of, of Cactus Jack, versus RKO. Of course, without the thumbtacks, if anything, that would have raised the level of violence by 1,000, But yeah, like I say, of course, saw Naomi trying to attack Jada in the aisle, but it didn't go as planned, and she ended up being thrown from one barricade to the next. So of course that's once they got close to the ring, that's when Naomi used steel steps to inflict damage, and then it didn't take long for them to start finding weapons. Naomi even kicked Jade into a TV. See, this is where the tide really changed. This one, when the intensity really went up to 10,000 almost. Not 10,000, but at least high enough, like to see Naomi drop kick Jade into, do a drop kick, on a Jade into a TV monitor, and of course that's what, and I was like, oof, man, this is almost reminding us of those death matches in Germany and Japan and stuff. But of course, blood wasn't necessary to make the match feel violent. It was stipulation like this, WB's PG violence restricts how intense they can get. Even though Naomi did end up having blood as well, end up having blood in herself. But they also set up a table, set up a table, and of course Jade, of course Cargill hit Jade from the middle rope, to put Naomi to the table for the win. And so I will say that this has been Jade's best match thus far, much like how that hardcore match is still to this day widely considers arguably Randy Orton's greatest match. Because that's what that match really elevated him and solidified him in ways like never before. And so I think that this match is doing that for Jade. And the story was even told after the match when Bianca raised Jade's arm, and you could just look at the sadness on Bianca's face, like tears starting to come down her eyes, and it just looked like she had guilt written all over her face. And that's why Jade was given a silent treatment and given a side eye. Because clearly they know something, that others don't know. So clearly, Jade herself even said, in interview where where she said she didn't trust Bianca either. So so clearly that body language is right there, and so I think it's definitely one of the highlights of Saturdays, and not Sunday, but Sunday's Evolution, excuse me. But yeah, of course we have the women's battle royal, incredible, um, and so of course we have Stephanie Bakir, Nia Jax / Legend, and those are the final three, and it was with Nikki Bella, Chelsea Green, among many others. Of course, Izzy Dane, Natalia, Jada Parker, you name it. And so we saw some nice spots, eliminations, and of course, of course we had Piper Niven as well. But yeah, like I say, I figured that the remaining few would include Lash, Nia. Of course, Evolution was in Atlanta, Lash's hometown, so of course she's got the hometown advantage. So of course, Nia, Lash, Stephanie. So as far as that, also ultimately that's what the final three came down to. And so and to see Lash and Nia clash like Lash clash that rhymes, but for those two powerhouses to finally lock horns, like this is what it's all about. And this, I'll have to say, has been Lash Legend's breakout performance. Win or lose, this is what has solidified her more than ever before. For her to step her game up against a veteran like Nia Jax and really hold her own like that, that speaks volumes. So ultimately, Nia, of course, to the point where, to the point where Lash even picked up Nia and slammed her. So that was a highlight right there. But ultimately, Nia was taken out by both Lash and Stephanie, and eventually Stephanie Bakir was the one to eliminate Lash Legend. And so she gets another accolade, and she's of course the winner of the Women's Battle Royal for Evolution Part 2. And last but not least, Io Sky versus Rhea Ripley. And this has been a thorn in Rhea's side, not just a monkey gorilla on her back, about how she's never beaten Io one-on-one. And so this is the opportune time for her to finally get that off her resume and to finally break that losing streak. And so of course it started with a pretty slow match, playing some mind games, and so those 1 point ref was taken out, and of course Io and Rhea of course fought into the crowd, obviously with no count out, and of course we saw Io do her Genius of the Sky thing, climb on production crates and the crossbody. So just typical Genius of the Sky things. And so we saw that Rhea kicked out over the moonsault, and so it looked like she was about to make a comeback. And of course, this is when things changed. When Naomi's music hit and she showed up to cash in the briefcase. This when history was made, and and she made a triple threat as Naomi would become, she become the first Black woman to cash in the Money in the Bank and win. And for her to do that, just iconic. This has been, other than the glow, other than like Feel the Glow, this has been the best run of Naomi's career. If anything, this run has made the biggest impact of Naomi's career. For her, this heel turn just has done miracles for her. And we saw that the Glow herself, the Queen of Caution, the Caution Queen, sent Rhea to the ring post, and they hit her finish on Io to get the win. Io Scotty to get the win and become the new world champion. It was a great way to great way to end this match. And there was a picture that shows three different, representations, three different sides of black women in this one event. So one is Naomi, the competitor. The other one is Daphne Sean, who's the referee, black referee, and Alicia Taylor, who was the commentator. The ring announcer. Of course, she was the one who announced that Naomi would, announcing that Naomi would cash in, and she also announced that Naomi was the winner. So all three of them made history in their own way. So all three of them were responsible for a very historic moment, much like how Bianca and Sasha, made history in a WrestleMania main event. So this is another example of the importance of representation, as inspiration, to little black girls all over the world. So that it's not just a cliche, but that's what it is. And shout out to Stephanie Hardy for asking Naomi that question at the press conference. And Naomi had the best, had the best interview set at the press conference. She was the best one. So like I say, of course, a salute to her. And as Biggie said, I think it's best. It's best that next time we don't have to wait another 70 years. So the fact that it took 70 years for them to do another evolution is just inexcusable. And so, if anything, if I had to give this a belt grade, I would give it about 4.5 out of 5. Charlotte Flair SmackDown Women's Championship belts. So I had to give it a belt rating. So that's what it is. I did just give it the highest one I could give. I was torn between that or like one of Becky's title reigns, like the 2019 title reign or whatever. But yeah, if anything, just for the sake of giving one, I say that. But yeah, like I said, this was a tremendous event, and so like I said, it was amazing. And to kick things off, of course, on Monday Night Raw to follow up, and of course, Naomi was the one to kick off Raw, and of course, we saw Rhea and Io, challenger, and of course, they were displeased, and of course, that's when Adam Pearce came out and made it official that SummerSlam would be a triple threat where Naomi defends against Io and Rhea, defends the Women's World Championship against them. Then we have the Kabuki Warriors versus Judgment Day. The winners, Roxanne and Raquel. 2 out of 3 falls match, Bayley versus Lyra. The winner of this match, Lyra, of course, 2-1. And we have Nikki Bella versus Chelsea Green. It's payback for Evolution. Of course, Chelsea mocked her. And the winner of this match, Nikki Bella. And so of course, 48. Gunther comes out 48 hours after. Actually, Adam Pearce also informed the New Day that they will have to earn their rematch for the tag team titles before telling Dominic that his rib injury reevaluated next Monday night. And of course, we saw AJ Styles. Obviously, of course, we saw AJ Styles in the corner. And of course, he was in the corner praying. Billy's praying for IC title match against Dominic at SummerSlam. And so of course we have Gunther. Of course, saying of course saw Gunther kind of promo 48 hours after retiring Goldberg, and so of course Gunther raised the question, who's next? That's when Braun Breaker comes out and says that he's next, and of course we Paul Heyman warned the ring general that's charged that Braun Breaker's charge was to break him at SummerSlam. Then of course we have a number of contenders gauntlet match. Of course we saw so that Braun Breaker and Penta kick things off. And Pentagon, of course, the Pentagon eliminated by Braun Breaker. And so we also saw that Braun Breaker eliminated LA Knight, thankfully. We also saw that Jey Uso got eliminated. We also saw that eliminated by Braun Breaker, only for CM Punk to eliminate Braun Breaker in the end. And so now SummerSlam is going to be CM Punk versus Gunther for the Royal Heavyweight Championship. We saw that CM Punk defeated Braun Breaker, Jey Uso, LA Knight, and Penta, on the gauntlet. And in the end, we also saw the return of Roman Reigns. So I was like, pretty much, so as far as that's concerned, business has picked up even more than ever before, especially with Seth being sidelined, and they really need to raise those those buy rates when it comes to SummerSlam. And so, who better than the OTC himself, the original Tribal Chief? I'm not calling him OTC one, but whatever. Like I said, of course, congratulations. Of course, glad to see Roman Reigns come back. But yeah, that's pretty much what it is. And this is my. So keep track. This is about to be. What do you know? Episode 200. So this is my 200th episode of the Victorious Ones podcast. So for me to have podcasts that started, about 3 years ago, for me to start this even during the pandemic, and to be this consistent for now my 200th episode, I want to thank those who follow and support and watch this on a regular basis, on a consistent weekly basis. You know what I mean? I want to make sure that this podcast continues to grow, that I continue to network, that my network continues to grow and become even stronger. And so I thank you. I thank every guest that I've had on the show, everyone that I've interviewed. You know what I mean? And of course, I look forward to even more coming up in the future. So for this to be 200 episodes, it is an absolute honor. It's a blessing, number one. And so I'd like to say, of course, I want to say thank you very much for those who watch, who listen, who keep themselves engaged, who continue to support in any way possible, any way, shape, or form. I greatly appreciate that. So this is the 200th episode of the Victorious Ones podcast. You know what I mean? And so, so for this milestone to happen, I'm absolutely honored and blessed and grateful. So now, as I close out this, bring this episode to a close, I would like to give a few birthday shout outs. Of course, on July 15th, Forrest Whitaker turned 64. On July 16th, Bobby Lashley turned 49. Also on the same day, Stuart Copeland from the legendary rock band The Police turned 73. Barry Sanders, of course, Hall of Fame running back Barry Sanders turns 57. On July 17th, friend of the program, Kelsey Nicole Nelson turns 33. As far as this weekend, my birthday is July 20th, along with 3-point legend Ray Allen. Also, on July 20th, he turns 50. So yeah. So thank you. And also July 19th, Stuart Scott's birthday. So before I get ahead of myself. And so you know what? Yeah, there you go. So like I said, so as far as as far as the birthdays, that's pretty much it. And so before I go, I would like to give a word of wisdom, and it is that God is worthy of our praise and worship because of what He has done and what He's still doing. We praise God for His mighty acts. We praise God for the way that He has delivered us and called us out of darkness into His marvelous light. And so if anything, you know, if anything, if anything, praise and worship is a sacrifice, and it's also for God's pleasure because He's worthy. He inhabits our praise, and like I said, of course, like I said, He called me. We praise Him for His mighty acts, and He's brought us out of darkness into light. And so those are the reasons why it's important for us to praise God, not just in good times, but even when things aren't always going our way. So that's my word of wisdom. And also remember that you're victorious because greater is He that is in you than he that's in the world. When you put God in first place, you don't have to worry about being in the last place. And of course, please make sure to listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and of course, make sure to subscribe and to tune in and watch this podcast on YouTube. youtube.com/@Von Virginia. Please make sure to like and subscribe for more great content. So once again, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching, and may this day be the very best day ever.